And I'm reminded even then, almost 100 years prior to the Civil War, that while we claimed those words in our Declaration of Independence, we were not always living out those words. Those words for many did not pertain to the slaves who had been brought to this country, some by Christian slave traders, many owned by Christian slave owners, and many of them were not benevolent Christian slave owners. Slaves were not thought to be equal. And so in the years that even followed the Civil War, you think of Reconstruction, the Reconstruction era, you think of the Jim Crow laws, the segregation being legalized in our country, and we're reminded that time and time again, that even those who claim to be followers of Jesus had a hard time of seeing everybody equally as children of God. And frankly, we still struggle with that. You didn't get to see the video because we were having trouble, but one of the things I loved about the Kid President video is that he talks about Dr. King, and he says, sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Sometimes people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that. It just keeps going even when things are dark. Kid President. Well said. Sounds like Jesus, actually. The Jesus who lived a different way, and as a result of living and modeling a different way, was considered by most to be an agitator and a troublemaker. But he just kept going. And he asked his followers to do the same. And so then think next generation. After Jesus too had his life cut down short, think next generation of disciples. Think a guy by the name of Saul, an elite amongst Jews, a Pharisee trained at the feet of Gamaliel, a Roman citizen, no less. Several things that Jesus was not. Think Saul, who became Paul. And think about what it meant for him to begin to model and preach a different way, which for him meant including Gentiles. Up until Paul began his ministry, most of the early church was made up of Jews who had become followers of Jesus. They were Jewish Christians. Paul even went to the apostles themselves to argue that the Gentiles have a place in the kingdom of God. And he met some resistance, but he kept pushing anyway. So much so that not only did he include the Gentiles in the kingdom and in the early churches that he helped to establish, but in the words I just read for you from Colossians, he even referred to the barbarians, which were considered to be a lower form of Gentiles. All the Greek Gentiles thought those who were not Greek Gentiles were more like barbarians, a lower culture. And of those who were considered barbarians, some were referred to as Scythians, which was the lowest form of barbarian. They were an ancient nomadic tribe that were not very well thought of in Paul's time. And it's in that context that we hear his words in Colossians 3, verses 1 through 4. And I think we have a slide for you since you didn't get to see me or see it earlier. Here it is. So if you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. It was Paul's way of saying, in the early church, when you were baptized, your old self was buried in that water. And there was a new self that was being raised up, a new way of thinking,